Man, I was looking at your resume. It's incredible. It's truly an honor. I appreciate you. You know, for somebody to have reached that magnitude, that level in your career to come on the show. We're gonna get into a lot of the things that you've accomplished. So for the viewers who may not recognize you or know who you are, let them know what your name is and definitely where you're from.
Okay. My name is Marvin Towns Jr., and I'm actually from Chicago, born and raised
Okay.
in Chicago. Yeah, but I live in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan now.
Oh, okay. That's what's up. Big shout out to Michigan and Chicago. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so that's around my way.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Actually, I know Cleveland fairly well because I've got a lot of friends down there, and I used to direct a lot of commercials in Cleveland.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. That's
so
what's
I
up.
have spent a lot of time in Cleveland and Shaker Heights, especially in the '80s. You probably weren't even born
Right.
then, but
I was around that era. Let me see. Okay, now I can ask you this: how do you even get into film? Is that something you always wanted to do? Is that something you got
not
into?
even
And
close.
uh huh.
Not even close. I tell people that basically I fell ass backwards into the movie business. And what happened was when I was in college in Chicago. Um, well, I'm from the Hyde Park section of Chicago, near the University of Chicago, and so we had some pretty prominent neighbors, Muhammad Ali being one of them. And growing up, we used to walk by when we were kids. We used to walk by Ali's house every day going to school, and we saw him in the neighborhood all the time. Driving around, all that. Well, I was an intern when I was in college at a financial firm, a brokerage, and there were all these rumors around the brokerage about Ali and Ali's finances, and so when you're 20 and pretty stupid, you take chances. And I literally one day went to Ali's house and knocked on his door, and he was there, and he invited me in. And I had this like pitch ready, to talk about the firm that I worked for and all that. I don't know what happened. It went out the window. And I ended up spending the entire day hanging out with him because he was at his house by himself. And to make a long story short, fast forward a couple of years, Muhammad was doing a TV miniseries with Chris Christopherson, and they were shooting in Natchez, Mississippi. And by this time, he was also a client of the firm. And I drove down to get him to sign some contracts. And while I was there, the director, his name was Jan Kadar, he came up to me and he said, "Could you stay?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Could you stay and hang out? We'll pay you because Muhammad is different with you here." And I'm like, "Okay." So, you're 20, 21 years old. What do? You say, "Okay." And I ended up what was going to be like 2 weeks turned into close to 2 months in Natchez, Mississippi. And I saw, a movie getting made, the TV series getting made, yada, yada, yada. So when we wrapped and I went back home to Chicago, I get a call from this young lady I had met on the show. And she said, "Well, do you think that you want to change careers?" And once again, I said, "Why not?" She said, "There is a little movie coming into Chicago, and one of my friends is one of the assistant directors. I might be able to get you on that movie." Well, that little movie turned out to be The Blues Brothers, which was the
Wow.
biggest movie being produced at the time. You know, and the assistant director that she was talking about was a guy named Lenny Garner, and because Lenny and I are friends to this day, and Lenny is probably arguably one of the top sitcom directors in the industry. Lenny has his brother has directed everything, and one of my best friends, and we're talking 43 years later. And
Wow.
so Lenny put me on Blues Brothers. I knew nothing, absolutely positively nothing. And John Landis Lenny and a couple of other people took a liking to me. And when we finished that show, they said, why don't you come back to California with us? So once again, it's like, why not? Um, and to just jump around a little bit. So I go back to California. They pulled some strings, and I got into the Directors Guild of America as an assistant director. And my first movie took me back to Chicago, and it was the movie Weird Science. Yeah, with Robert Downey Jr. and all those guys. Yeah,
Right.
it's funny because I was just talking to someone about Tom Cruise because I worked on Tom Cruise's breakout movie, which was Risky Business. Yeah, and I worked on
Wow.
Sean Penn's breakout movie. Um, I because I was only a couple of years older than all these guys, so a lot of producers wanted me around because in production, I'm like the same age as these young dudes, so they figured we could relate, and it did work out. And and then another producer, um, his name is Joel Silver, and Joel Silver produced everything from the Predator movies, the Lethal Weapon series. What else did Joel do? The Bruce Willis, the series that Bruce Willis did.
With the Die Hard.
The Die Hard series,
Wow.
action movies. Joel Silver was the man when it came to action movies. And Joel Silver also produced this film Streets of Fire, which was this big budget rock and roll music movie with a bunch of stars. Um, and that was the first movie I worked on with him. And then when Weird Science, and then we did weird, worked on Weird Science with him. So it was a bunch of it was just a lot of luck and being in the right place at the right time and working my butt off.